Hello and welcome to this webinar titled Creating Smart, Sustainable and Hybrid Environments. My name's Sam Wood. I lead our Smart and Sustainable Environments practice across EMEA. I'm joined by Mark Needham, who leads our hybrid work practice, and Colin Seward, who is our Director of Service Delivery within Cisco's own IT organization. So let's get into it. Mark, do you want to talk us through how things have changed post-pandemic and how people are getting back to the office and taking advantage of frictionless productivity and an amazing Cisco-centric experience using all of our hybrid work technologies?
Thank you, Sam, and thank you for joining today, everybody. I think the best place to start is just to be really clear that when we talk about hybrid work from a Cisco perspective, what do we actually mean? So we've actually had a hybrid work culture internally for more than 12 years. So we've ideated and really driven this transformation over a number of years, and it's now exciting to see everybody joining us on that as well. But I think the first thing to call out is that many are still finding this transition really complicated. In fact, there was some recent research from McKinsey that said more than 60% of organizations do not still have a plan for their hybrid work future. And I think the reason for that is many are finding it challenging because of the changes and how it's impacted them organizationally. So if we look back very briefly, pre the pandemic, work was mostly in the office, there was low variability, and everyone had a pretty consistent experience. During the pandemic, work was mostly at home, there was low variability, and everyone had a consistent experience. So that transition kind of felt more comfortable and more an easier path to go on. Where we've moved to now is in a post-pandemic world where work is everywhere. And the true essence of hybrid work is very dynamic, there's high variability, and you could be working in any location. And ultimately, it's about allowing your employees to do every aspect of their role from any location, be that a home office, be that in the corporate office, or anywhere in between. And you look at the data points, 75% of the workforce no longer work full time from an office. And a stat from Gartner, which I'm sure you've heard many people cite, is that 98% of meetings moving forwards are going to have remote attendees. So to your point about what's been changing and how do you create a new experiences, Sam, there's a few key elements. Firstly, it's the mental reframing of the role of an office. So we've moved beyond a world where the office was the center of everything. All your people were there, all your technology that was there, your network, your teas, your coffees, everything that existed in your company resided in the office. Where we've moved to now is that the office is just one of several entry points into the tools that underpin this hybrid work experience that allow your workers to be fully effective from any location. And of course, that includes the meetings, the callings, the collaborative tools, but it's also about how you allow them to meet your customers where they are, and how they want to be engaged because they are now have their lives spent in a hybrid fashion. And because everybody's working in a far more dynamic, far more variable way, the role of SASE and zero trust and the security wraparound you put on your employees becomes even more important as the hybrid work model expands just beyond people internally having meetings to underpinning every engagement you have with every stakeholder to your organization, be that suppliers, external partners, internal teams, and customers as well. So that's really kind of the crux of the transition. There's also some really interesting data points off the back of the Cisco Hybrid Work Survey, which was launched again. Well, the second edition came out in June. And again, it's talking about how people's needs have evolved again. So initially, it was all about meetings. The goal of hybrid work was to allow people to have meetings when they're at home. Really one-dimensional. That's clearly not underpinning every aspect of your organization. That's meetings are now just one tool that goes into the teamwork, the collaborative processes you have internally. Obviously, to do every facet of your role from every location, it comes into needs of security, the correct access, having a reliable, consistent network when you're at home, as you are when you're in the office. And also, we're seeing people really start to adopt the AI-powered experiences that are built into collaboration platforms. So we've seen an almost 500% increase in elusive closed captioning to subtitles. We've seen an almost 200% increase in real-time translation. People are back working in this way across all geographic boundaries and helping people have that greater clarity of understanding in a multilingual meeting. And the use of Q&A and polling to drive that engagement, particularly in big settings when somebody could just have a meeting running here and be doing something totally different over here. So we're seeing those changes, and the hybrid work exchanges are becoming quicker, more fluid, and just more intuitive. So a lot of people talk about the kind of water cooler moments, but I think we're now starting to see those kind of things become part of a hybrid work moment where it's a quick interaction, quickly need something, you speak to somebody about one topic, then you end up going off on a tangent and covering off something else. So there's still that rich level of engagement, and we're seeing that really at the heart of what people are doing. And coming back to the office point, so as we said, the office is still hugely important, but it needs to fulfill a slightly different purpose. And now it needs to provide an experience that's so rich, that's so social, that is so far beyond the experience people have had at home, that it's going to motivate them to return. I know Colin's going to be talking about that on the call today. And a lot of that is around making sure the right technologies are provided. Everyone is going to be coming into meetings remotely, so you're always going to need to have access to that video. Making sure your office is configured in a right way based on the behaviors your teams now exhibit, and how you can use automations and the AI that are already built into the technologies to remove those frustrations. So what's the point of going to a office if you can't get a meeting room, if it's got the wrong technology, if you can't get a desk, if the food's bad, if it's noisy, if it's an unengaging place to be? All of these are reasons to not go into an office, but all of these are things that technology can help transform to remove those frictions. So I think when we talk about the kind of what's changed, the dynamic elements we've seen and how that fits into hybrid work, I think that kind of summarizes it kind of quite nicely. But one area I did touch on there, and I'm going to come back to you here, Sam, is the role of AI and automations and how that removes this friction, how this creates these delightful experiences, these people-centric experiences people want as they go back into the office for that aspect of their hybrid working lives. So when I would refer to that part of those automations as trigger points into a smart building strategy. But in the same way, people may have different definitions of what they view hybrid work is. Obviously, in our case, it's every aspect of your role from every location. When we refer to smart and what that can drive, Sam, what do we actually mean? What's the meat on that statement?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So we use smart and intelligent interchangeably. So what is a smart building or an intelligent environment? Well, it's an environment where disparate IT, OT, that's operational technology, and IoT, Internet of Things, systems are integrated over a common homogeneous converged network. A Cisco converged network is the foundation of a smart and sustainable environment. And these disparate systems, once integrated over a converged network, can talk to each other. At 22 Bishopsgate, there's a great example of really smart building technologies. So the Cisco converged network enables solar sensors on the facades of the building to talk to the blinds. There are 9,000 blinds on every pane of glass within that building. And that building is essentially like a very large greenhouse, right? Glass buildings in hot weather heat up very quickly. And so they can burn a huge amount of energy and place a lot of load on the HVAC, the heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. And so through the converged network, integrating those solar sensors, those blinds, the indoor sensors around temperature controls, integrating that through rules and algorithms in the building management system, we can then ensure that when the sun comes out and is very strong and the heat in the building builds up and those sensors trigger rules within the BMS, the blinds can come down, reducing the load on the HVAC system, reducing that greenhouse effect, saving electricity, and reducing carbon dioxide emissions as a consequence of that energy no longer being consumed. So that's a really good example of where essentially those disparate systems, when integrated properly with the right rules and automation, can create a truly smart environment. So from our perspective, Colin, obviously, Cisco is customer zero for a lot of its technology. Tell us a little bit about how we're adopting hybrid, smart, and sustainable within Cisco.
So inside of Cisco, if you're not familiar with our footprint, we have around about 350 plus buildings, and we operate in 95 countries globally. And those buildings, they range from small little field offices. Our smallest field office is just for one person up in Iceland. They go up through various different sizes, and then we go up to large campuses like in San Jose or in the UK and other places. And the building footprint that we have has really grown up around the needs of the business. And within each of those buildings, it's been designed around the business activities in that office. So we have some offices which are more geared towards engineering, some are more geared towards sales. And inside a typical building, you might find a variety of different spaces. You might find areas for doing heads down work. You find areas for doing collaboration as a team, maybe for doing training, hosting events with customers. Maybe you've got labs for designing new products, or you might have data centers and things like that. So there's a variety of different spaces inside our offices. And the real estate itself, some of it we own, so some of it is owned by Cisco, some of it we lease. Some of the buildings are new, some of them are very old. So our real estate is really quite a mix. It's a very diverse mix of different buildings. And I think that's probably true for a lot of big companies and people who are listening. So within that footprint, it's always changing. So it's never a static picture. We're always looking at what new offices can we open up, what ones can we close, where might we just need to expand and have more space, where can we consolidate buildings, and we're looking at modernization. So as we've seen these different waves coming through, particularly with hybrid and now with smart buildings and a focus on sustainability, looking at how we can modernize it, which is a bit of an interplay between the facilities team and increasingly technology has become a really important part of all of our buildings. So from the IT standpoint, we've seen this journey over the last few years, and it's felt sort of inevitable, this evolution towards smart buildings. But I think we're definitely hearing that much louder now. So we're definitely hearing, because of hybrid and sustainability, we're seeing a lot more requests inside of Cisco, and we're seeing the speed of change is really increasing. So just to give a couple of quick examples from from what's happening internally. If you looked at the Singapore office was one of the last offices we upgraded just before the pandemic. And as Mark was alluding to earlier, we've operated in a hybrid workforce in many of our offices for a long period of time. That was particularly true in Singapore. So when we were doing the redesign of the Singapore office, even though it was pre-pandemic, a lot of the design was influenced by the fact that the workforce was operating in a hybrid mode. So we had a lot of meeting spaces, a lot of areas for collaboration. We recognized that there were a lot of users who were remote attending things. So one of the design principles we had around Singapore was to make sure it was 100% video enabled. And that really has become a core part of our hybrid office strategy going forward. Then, of course, we went through the pandemic itself, and then coming out of that, one of the first offices that we've reopened is New York City. So New York City was one which we redesigned during the end of the pandemic in line with our forward-looking strategy. So we recognized that the new trend for buildings was both going to be hybrid working. So we took a lot of the lessons learned from Singapore, brought those into New York, extended them out in New York City with some of the latest equipment. But we also recognized that we needed to make New York City an example of a more sustainable and a really smart building. So New York was one where we did really push the envelope in terms of the technology in it. So a lot of the things you described in 22 Bishopsgate, we have in our office in New York City, and it's probably our best example internally of what we see as our vision for smart buildings. Now, I guess I mentioned our real estate is very diverse. We have a clear direction of travel, but we don't have a one-size-fits-all for all of this, which makes it complicated internally. And I suspect, Sam, when you're out talking to customers, it makes it complicated for you as well. So be curious to know, how are you talking to customers about delivering this strategy where they have a diverse portfolio and they have constraints around budgets and also around leasing as well and things like that?
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, it's a great run through of how we're sort of adopting hybrid, smart, and sustainable. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There are always going to be hurdles to overcome when you're making changes to an operational environment. And different scenarios call for different strategies. For example, if time and budgets are somewhat constrained, or the ability to change the floor plate of the building is not there, there's still a lot you can do. In an office environment, there are lots of light touch things you can do, upgrading your Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi 6. That's not going to close your office for weeks on end. It's relatively straightforward. Likewise, you can deploy software like DNA Spaces, which will enable data analytics and occupancy to be understood better, and to enable you to better understand where facilities are available, and meeting rooms are free, and those types of user experience use cases. WebEx endpoints, clearly they can be implemented in a relatively light touch way too, and these product families can make a myriad of smart use cases possible, taking advantage of the inbuilt sensors within those devices. Catalyst Wi-Fi access points now have a myriad of sensors within them, WebEx endpoints likewise, and so you can start to enable these sensors to feed in data to your environment without having to go through a sort of full building retrofit. Likewise, within DNA Spaces, there's lots of native applications and out-of-the-box integrations with third-party applications like digital signage, wayfinding, these kinds of things. And so these solutions can also be deployed through buying programs and financing like Cisco Capital GreenPay, where customers can get incremental discount and more cost-effective deployment of our technology, whilst also ensuring that their technology is recycled at the end of its useful life, sort of enabling them really to adopt hybrid, smart, and sustainable technologies more quickly. But the next level of sophistication, and where we've really taken things with Penn1, is where we actually replace the electrical network in the workplace with Power over Ethernet. And many people will be familiar with Power over Ethernet for many years now. Desk phones. I'm not sure we see as many of those anymore. But desk phones always used to be powered via, ever since the kind of integration of data and telephony back in the late 90s. We've seen kind of those desk phones being powered by the network. So Power over Ethernet's been around a long time. Where it's changed is we can now deliver up to 90 watts per port, and that's a real advantage that Cisco networks have. We can now power up to 9, 10, 11 things on a single port, because obviously, PoE LED lighting is very low power. So you can really take advantage of DC power through the network to essentially replace your electrical network. And with Penn1, we know that office where we've replaced a lot of the power hungry systems in that office as it was before with DC PoE, and those like for like systems being powered through the network, the lighting, the displays, digital signage, window blinds, all of these things. Those same things are actually now consuming just a third of the power. So we've gone from about 1 watt per square foot in that office to 0.32 of a watt per square foot in that same space. So that's a major advantage. And of course, if it's on the network, if it's powered by the network, then it can be monitored, managed, automated, controlled, etc. And that's where you can then start to build in some of those real AI ops driven use cases. So, taking it a step further, if you're building a new building or have the ability to do a sort of full deep retrofit, that takes where we got to with PoE and really drives that beyond just the tenant's domain, but into the whole building operational technology system. So you've then got a full converged network integrating all of the different systems, whether it's the elevators, whether it's the escalators, whether it's the blinds, whether it's the access control. So at 22 Bishopsgate, for example, there's not a single plastic key card issued to any of the 12,000 people that use that building. They all use the app for that building, and that's their authentication and access control into the building and into their different domains within the building. And that then enables you to be really, really focused on your CSR and ESG and net zero targets, because you can start to create that automation between those systems, optimize your energy consumption. But it's not just about energy consumption. You can then start to predict through occupancy the amount of raw material you need, the amount of produce you'll need for the food and beverage offering. You can then minimize the number of deliveries of produce that are coming into a building like 22 Bishopsgate, where there's a large number of people consuming lunch, coffee, etc. And all of those deliveries produce responsible for carbon emissions, and all of the produce that's wasted if you overorder can be minimized. So I think that the key advantage really around going the whole hog is that you can really drive all of the benefits across the operational technology within the building environment, the landlord's environment, but also the tenant's environment too. But one thing we always say is you shouldn't let the great get in the way of the good. If you can't get to great, good will still be tons better than the average right now. And the North Star should always be employee experience. Customer experience led design is the way forward. And we're looking at that for Paris. We've done that for Pen 1, and the experience is really fantastic when we get it right. So Mark, I'd love to ask you how our portfolio impacts sustainability within the workplace. It'd be great to understand more about how the hybrid technologies that Cisco's developed is now driving that sustainability agenda. Over to you.
Thank you, Sam, for the question. And it's a really big topic. So I'll touch on the surface today to give you some other areas where we could potentially follow up with in more detail. But the key elements, how these things are coming together, are the employees are demanding a hybrid work experience. The wider societal expectations on you as an organization is you to become more, to increase your sustainability credentials. Every one of you on this call probably published a CSR report at the moment. And the key links are that the more hybrid your working patterns are, the more sustainable you can be. If you want to be a really sustainable organization by adopting hybrid work culture, that will allow you to accelerate your transition to being a really sustainable organization as well. And I'll touch on a few kind of key elements that come together for that. So if you think about the ESG metrics, so the environmental, societal and governance metrics that you would be reporting on, there are 5 ones that really jump off the page when it comes to the impact hybrid work can have on those. And Sam, you touched on one of these a bit already, which is around the kind of energy consumption. So Sam spoke about the PoE and the impact that can have on the materials and how they can enhance your credentials from that perspective. But beyond that, the actual devices and technology that underpins your hybrid working culture, they can help reduce your energy consumption and improve those credentials as well. So if you take a video endpoint, so every meeting space needs a dedicated video endpoint in, because 98% of meetings are going to have a remote participant. I'm on a product at the moment that's called a Cisco Desk Pro. And if you compare this to its predecessor, the EX90 that it replaced, it uses 75% less power than the earlier model. So you can see that into the heart of our products, we're trying to make them more energy efficient, while also driving that unique experiences that employees are looking for. Secondly, Sam spoke about the benefits of a converged network, how you can integrate all these solutions onto that kind of single network. Well, the Cat 9K is a product that drives that, and that is up to 30% more efficient than legacy switches and that of our competitors that have in the marketplace. So clearly that can have a really dramatic, measurable impact there as well. And then when you think about as you move to PoE experience, so smart builders can save upwards of 45% of the energy waste by using DC power VAC. And I think, Sam, you used the data point from the team in New York that they've actually increased that even beyond that due to the level of automation and the level of integrations that they've brought into play. The second area, which is really important when it comes to improving your ESG metrics, is around the approach to circular design. So when we talk about circular design within Cisco, what we're talking about is how we go about making the products, how you go about using them, how you consume them, and then what happens next, how they're reused and recycled. And across our entire portfolio, every architecture we have within Cisco, of which there are several, we have the circular economy at the heart of that. And we're doubling down on that again and again, using less packaging, making the products more efficient. When they're being used, just making them more efficient to manage, more efficient for your employees to use. The way you consume it, Sam mentioned the Cisco Green Play offer, where there's a kind of trade-in and there's an incentive because the devices will be recycled via the circular economy at the end. And we have a product take back, a product reuse program as well, which helps customers on this journey themselves, while extending the benefits for people that may not have had access to those devices in the first instance. Think developing countries, charities, and so forth. So that's the second one when it comes to the ESG metrics. The third big one, and we're all familiar with this with the explosion of the move to electric cars, is CO2 emissions that are driven via business travel. Be that flying, be that getting in the car, or be that you getting on a train. So what's clearly, by not getting in the car, by not getting on the plane, there is a benefit to be had. Okay, and that is unique to Cisco. That's any technology you use to not get on that plane, not get in that car, would have that benefit. That said, that when you look at the efforts we've made to make our solutions energy efficient and the devices which are used to avoid the getting on the plane, getting in a car, to give you an idea of kind of the payback period, if you could avoid 20 train journeys by using the device that I'm on at the moment, that nets out the lifetime sustainability impact of this particular product. If I avoid one flight because I use this Desk Pro that I have on my desk, that equates to the whole life cycle footprint of that particular product. So clearly that not all solutions are equal when it comes to the impact you can have by avoiding that flight, getting in the car, getting in that train. And the fourth element is around the software experiences, the tools which underpin hybrid work. Now, these are cloud delivered tools. And what that really means for you as organizations is that the data centers that power these cloud devices, in the case of WebEx within Cisco Europe, is net zero itself. So the data centers that host the WebEx platform, that underpins your ability to do every aspect of your role from any location, are powered by net zero data centers. So that can improve your credentials there as well. And a nice little side story tied to this and how this links to business resiliency as well. So if we go across the pond to Texas, actually where Sam is today, the data centers there are actually powered by a wind farm. And when there was an ice storm in Texas last year, the power went down for everything but our data centers because they are powered by the wind farm, helping the resiliency of our customers. So really impactful things that having this sustainability mindset where the focus on hitting these ESG metrics can really make a dramatic impact on you organizationally. The final area I wanted to touch on, Sam, about how we link together the tools, the platforms, the portfolio, and what it does when it comes to sustainability around the role of inclusivity and well-being. So at a global level, the United Nations have defined, with more than all the countries in the world, 17 metrics, 17 sustainable development goals tied to ending world poverty, to protect the planet, with a really bold objective of hitting these goals by 2030. They're all linked together, but when we look at the process and technology, how we underpin this hybrid work experience, this directly allows you to hit these goals. In fact, 7 of the 17 are hit via adopting hybrid work within your organization. So clearly, by you providing more support to allow people to work at home, it makes you more inclusive, gender equality, people with disabilities. You can broaden out the people that could be part of your workforce, bringing the best insights while also making it a more inclusive place to be. This support for hybrid work has allowed lots of organizations to explode back to growth in a post-pandemic world. So really key steps here, which just underpin the new workflow of this role of autonomy, the ability to work from every location, can directly help these elements. Secondly, when it comes to the role of security, obviously everyone's familiar with cybersecurity. Everyone's heard about someone getting hacked or an organization getting fined because of a data leak. By adopting the zero trust approach, which is foundational to underpinning hybrid work, you hit 3 of these sustainable development goals that relate to privacy, that relate to justice, that relate to how we drive secure innovation and how these elements come together. So that's really key as well. And linking back to the earlier point I just made about how the data centers in net zero will clearly via the cloud platform powering your hybrid work approach, that's going to impact climate change. Clearly, by embracing more remote collaboration, by not getting that plane, not getting that car, that is also going to have an impact on improving kind of the climate and those side of things as well. So it's a really big topic. Try to touch some key themes there, and we can of course unpick those as part of a follow-up. Although one thing that does come to mind, Colin, I'm going to come to you here, is that not every country has the same culture, has the same approach to power, has the same resources in country, or the same approaches to how they build their buildings. So you mentioned earlier we have access to 300 buildings, they're all over the world. So surely where they are, the location and those elements must have an impact on how smart and sustainable they can be, and of the options you could go for, which ones you would pick based on a particular location.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mark. As I'm listening to you and Sam going through these, I'm thinking through the portfolio. And as you say, we've got internally inside of Cisco, we've got offices in 95 countries. And as you say, different countries, we see that there's different conditions. In those different locations, we require a different strategy internally. So we're always trying to balance the needs of the business in that particular location, and then what's possible with the fabric of that particular building, what technology is actually available locally, and even if it's available, can it be supported in that particular geography? Then we're looking at local legislation, we're looking at budget available. So there's a lot of things that we balance when we look at what we do in a particular location. And New York for us, I mean, it was a great place for us to build the first one of this new generation of smart buildings. So it was a great place where we could go all in because everything came together, and there may be some things in that which we might not do everywhere, but that having an example where you have everything together really gives you a lot of insights. So from an IT, from a real estate perspective, our facilities team, we're all learning a lot from what's happening in New York, which we can then feed into the rest of our strategies we look forward. So I think that having an example in a company to do that learning is really important. And from that, there's sort of lessons learned which really back up what you and Sam have been saying. I mean, we see that whatever location we're in, we're going to have 100% video enablement. We think that's really critical now for the hybrid work strategy. Likewise, we see increasing number of sensors. We think that's critical because what you want to do in all of your real estate is you want to have fast feedback loops. You want to have database decisions, so you need to have the data being fed out of your building, telling you about occupancy levels, telling you about the amount of energy you're using, where you're using it, and so forth. So we see a lot of sensors. That's a critical thing in all our buildings going forward. This OT convergence with IT that we're talking about, again, we see that's a trend that's critical in every location. And from that, a big focus on security to make sure that we don't have any problems with people who shouldn't be on our network getting into it. I think where we see the variation in the different locations is likely more around the sustainability side, because within sustainability, the electricity in different locations does vary depending on the electric grid. So the carbon intensity if you go up to Norway, very low carbon intensity because there's a lot of hydroelectricity. France is quite low carbon intensive because there's a lot of nuclear power. In the US, we're able to source a lot of renewable energy. It's not true in every country. So our strategy will vary in location depending on the local electric grid and how carbon intensive it is. It'll also vary depending on our use of HVAC. So in some places where the climate requires a lot of air conditioning in the summer because it's very hot, or a lot of heating in the winter, again, we may vary our approach for there. Other areas, we may vary our approach because it's in a water conservation area, so maybe that's a huge challenge. So location does have a big influence on things, and it has an influence both on the office environment, and Mark, you alluded to the WebEx Desk Pro. Even within that, so when you're looking at your home environment, it influences the payback periods in the home environment. So we've calculated out the Desk Pro and the return when you're in places of high carbon intensity electricity and low carbon intensity electricity. So those sort of things have an impact. And maybe Sam, throwing it back to you. So how do the various smart building technologies and the converged networks, how do they impact the ability for a building to be sustainable?
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, so essentially it is about that kind of integration leading to automation, and AI ops, where we define AI ops as essentially artificial intelligence informed operations, creating kind of a sort of constant feedback loop, which you referred to, Colin. You've got that constant state of optimization, and one of the best ways of sort of surfacing that and really visualizing that is through technologies like digital twins. And it's a great way of really being able to audit the fact that this works. And so coming back to the 22 Bishopsgate example, where I mentioned earlier, the blinds and the HVAC and the solar sensors and the temperature sensors, etc., are all kind of integrated together through the Cisco Converged Network. We can see at the 22 Bishopsgate building management system digital twin, we can see the impact of the blinds on some floors where they're being allowed to work automatically, being driven by the sensors, and other floors where they're being manually overridden, so that every 4 hours when the blinds might be reset to their automated state, they're overridden by tenants on those floors. And we can see through that digital twin the impact that has on the energy consumed by the HVAC within those floors. And one of the things that I guess was key for 22 Bishopsgate is they wanted to really understand how energy was being consumed by different tenants, and that then might enable them to bill accordingly the tenants that are consuming more electricity, etc., but also inform them as to how they can better use energy and become more efficient and become more sustainable. So where the blinds are being overridden and are not automated, the energy consumption on those floors from the HVAC is actually 2 times, and more than 2 times in many cases, the energy consumption where the HVAC is not being required to work so hard because the blinds are coming down when the sun is heating up that area of the building. So very, very substantial kind of energy savings there. And of course, assuming that energy is not renewable as it comes into that building, then you're creating a lot of carbon, unnecessary carbon, through overriding those blinds. So as a consequence of understanding, and seeing that data from the digital twin, we can inform tenants and we can use those smart technologies to better use their energy consumption. But, it's not all about energy consumption, as I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of embedded carbon in electrical cables, in the plastic coating to those electrical cables, in the metal shielding, the conduit around those cables. So if you're moving to PoE and you're delivering a lot of your electricity via the network rather than through a separate high voltage electrical network, you're actually saving a lot in raw materials, which would otherwise have to be implemented into the built environment. And obviously those materials have been manufactured, and in that process they've consumed energy and created carbon. So just the actual implementation of a smart building provides an opportunity to save a lot in the embedded materials, embedded carbon in those materials. And I mentioned earlier, understanding occupancy, helps around materials coming into the building on a day-to-day basis, but also, understanding how the operational technology systems are operating and how you're monitoring those systems. So use cases like predictive maintenance, where you can understand, vibrations in a lift that might result in a safety issue, or in fact the lifts are working fine, and so you can miss a service interval without creating a safety issue. As a consequence of predictive maintenance, we can understand how to efficiently maintain systems within a building, and minimize engineer call outs, etc., which can result in incremental emissions. So that's some examples there. But Colin, as customer zero for our own technology, what are the core Cisco building blocks for smart and sustainable hybrid environments?
Ensuring we have the right collaborative equipment to enable a hybrid. So looking at the sort of WebEx endpoints we need to put into meeting rooms, huddle spaces, on desks, in training spaces, in boardrooms. So we want to have that everywhere. And then it's extending the network infrastructure to connect the IT and OT. So again, as we talked about, the Catalyst 9300s to provide power over Ethernet when we're trying to reduce cabling, adding in all those IoT devices, security cameras, environment sensors, and then using DNA spaces in our case as a layer on top of that to try to aggregate all the data so we can make intelligent decisions and expose that to the end users. And of course, security as well. I mean, once you connect all these things together, making sure security is core as part of it. And I think look at all those skills, I mean, the good thing is we found that we had all those skills inside of Cisco IT already. I think one of the learnings for us as we started implementing smart buildings like New York City was, to start with, it was the facilities team that were reaching out to those different teams on the IT side. So the facilities team would reach out to the network team and say, oh, can you help us with the networking? And then to the collaboration team and so forth. So the facilities team ended up coordinating the various IT components to come together. And what we've done over time is we've now built up a hybrid work smart buildings team inside of Cisco IT. So it's a multidisciplinary team. They would still reach out to the experts in some of the other teams when they need to, but within that team, they now have a broader picture of the strategy which we're pursuing, and they look for opportunities to integrate it better, to try to look for cost savings and optimization within the solution, and to see how we can leverage the solution from one building to the next one. That same group inside of IT, they don't just look at the smart buildings, they look at hybrid work holistically. So as we've touched upon as well, with a hybrid work strategy, your office needs to work seamlessly with a home environment. So we have that one team who's looking across office and home and making sure that the technology works seamlessly for our users wherever they are. So that's kind of where we got to internally and some of the things we're seeing core. Sam, maybe you can touch a little bit on that interrelationship between smart, sustainable, and hybrid.
Thanks, Colin. As we begin to wrap up here, it's probably becoming obvious that there's a huge interrelationship between hybrid, smart, and sustainable. And if hybrid is the driver, where you're deploying video and collaboration tools, you're also enabling components of smart and sustainable through the sensors that are enabled in those devices and software like DNA Spaces. If smart is your driver, you're enabling sustainability through again, those sensors monitoring the environment and enabling it to be operated efficiently. So the lights are on, where there are people, but where there are no people, then there's no need for the lights to be on. Where there are people working, there's just enough heating and cooling not too much or too little. If sustainability is your driver, your environment has to be smart. You'll get to net zero much quicker if you're deploying a Cisco converged network as a backbone for your IT, OT, and IoT connectivity. And if it's smart already, it's easier to layer on those hybrid technologies. So the interrelationship is really key. And the more those three elements are thought about and implemented together, the more they become force multipliers essentially for each other. So a great catalyst essentially across those three elements of smart, sustainable, and hybrid. But Mark, let's close by coming back to you and ask really how we get started on implementing smart and sustainable hybrid environments.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And actually, to help answer this question, I'm going to use our sole slide from the day. And I think one of the most interesting points from Colin and Sam, your responses to the last two questions, was around how you need to ensure the consistency between the experience with the at-home, on the move, and in-office experience. So we've mentioned various products on this call. So I totally get it if you're listening in going, that sounds like a lot of stuff. We just want to get like a small piece to get us rolling. And the reality is that when we look at our customers, the customers that are already on this journey with Cisco, they actually already have quite a lot of the key component parts they need to realize these outcomes. And it's just about joining the dots. So the quick representation that we have here on the screen is if you think about the tools I mentioned, which underpin working from anywhere, where your home office is an entry point to these tools. Your office is an entry point into these tools. And these are really the tools that allow you to collaborate, the breadth of the WebEx suite, from everything from whiteboarding, calling, meetings, the control hub manageability of that experience, the integrations into contact centers and so forth. We've mentioned lots the need to secure your workforce. And obviously that's the role around Duo, the threat monitoring, the threat detection. Yeah, got tongue tied, the threat monitoring, the threat remediation, VPN to manage that access. You need to ensure that performance, so you have 1,000 eyes that gives you that visibility end to end of what your employees are going through. And obviously you need to manage that network via the cloud, which is where the Meraki element comes in. So this is really these foundational tools which are at the heart of everything. And many of our customers, as I said, will already be on this journey and have, if not all of these, several of these already. Those for when you're at home, in fact, all three of us are at home now, it's the role of dedicated video endpoints for the home office. There's a couple of examples you have on the screen. I use a Desk Pro. The Desk Mini is one that's a bit smaller in function and in size, has the exact same feature set as what I'm using here. We've got the headsets for the audio privacy. My children have actually just got home from gymnastics camp. It is school holidays when we're recording this. And luckily they're being quiet, otherwise I would be needing that headset. And how you can then manage the access onto the network and how you can prioritize me working via what my children are doing via the Meraki access points and those tools to help me have that robust experience when I'm at home. So that's the at-home element. And obviously that they all pair at the heart of those anywhere tools which underpin this. And of course, the third element here is what you need to put in the office. So we've spoken about already multiple times the need that 98% of meetings are going to have remote participants. So therefore, you need the dedicated video devices in all the meeting spaces. These sensors, which Colin mentioned and that Sam's mentioned, that trigger those automations as part of the smart buildings, are built into the heart of these video devices, which you're going to need anyway. So there's no need for that duplication of spend. Obviously, you're going to have the access points. You're going to have, so you can get onto the internet. The sensors are built into there as well, and via the Cat9K and the network infrastructure that allows you to converge these networks to realize these new experiences that we've been speaking about. On here, you also have the DNA Spaces element. This is your visualization for when you're in the office to understand the environment, what's going on at any point in time, and allow you to bring together those trigger points and the automations to make your workplace more smarter. So the really key element is that all these things are interrelated. They're all designed to work together to allow you to thrive in the hybrid working world. The key, as you said, the key element is as we've gone through this narrative today, it may feel like we're talking about, it is a big topic. It may feel that there are lots of elements that are coming together, but every customer we're working with that is on this journey, they've already got many of the key components, many of the building blocks to realize this hybrid, smart and more sustainable future. And it's just about determining the ones that are missing, the ones that need refreshing, and working with your IT teams to do the automations, to do the integrations that are needed to unlock the massive value. You can reach out to our team at Cisco that will help you with that discovery sessions, help you unpick what you have, where there are gaps, and help you plan a course forward to where we are. And admittedly, we are very mature. We've been doing this for 12 years, or plan a multifaceted step-by-step process to get you started on a path, as Sam called out really early on in the call today. You can start small as you grow, build up to unlocking the value across all of these areas that we've spoken about today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark, and thanks everyone for joining the webinar today. I hope that's been helpful. We will, gladly answer any questions you have. If you want to follow up, please do let us know. There'll be, I believe, an email being sent out to all attendees so that you'll get some more links to resources and the ability to engage with our teams as you look to deploy Cisco technology around driving hybrid, smart, and sustainable environments. So thanks very much for attending, and we look forward to helping you out and talking to you as you go on this journey together. Thanks very much, and goodbye.